In here heard Judge Nally when he spoke. Okay, how many heard were here when I spoke? I'm judge. Now, how many of you have shared what you heard from him or from me with your friends or neighbors? Fantastic. How many of you were received when you told them they could judge the law?
Shocked is the response. Shocked.
That's what I expected, because when I first discovered this, and that's the way I like to talk about it, because a few years back I was exceedingly ignorant. I'm still ignorant, but I'm not exceedingly ignorant anymore. When I found this out and began to tell people, they looked at me like I was literally a nut. And so what I started doing, I started carrying this little book here with me. I keep it in my briefcase nearly all the time. This is a copy of Georgia's Constitution, where it plainly states in here in Article 1, Paragraph 11, the jury shall be the judges of the law and the facts.
How many in this audience knows that? Okay, it's not enough. You see?
So
we're doing the right thing.
You can see right now with a few hands that came up, part of what the problem is in our nation. You know, you hear people all the time say, if you don't know your rights, how do you know if you're losing them? Well, this is one of our rights that we clearly have, but we've lost it, literally. It's still here, but if we don't exercise these rights, then they're gone. It's that simple. And this is so important of a concept to really get behind our little noggins, because coming to meetings is wonderful, because we do learn things. But if we don't use it and we don't share it, then we've really wasted our time. So I want to impress upon you the need not just to come and learn, but as you hear things from these different panelists, share that with your neighbors, share it with your friends and your family. The word has got to spread. Our schools are not going to teach this, especially now that we've got Common Core. Believe me, this kind of stuff will never surface in a school that has Common Core. And the reason this is so important, sometimes when I give my personal testimony about my salvation experience, I like to use an example that someone showed me one time, and it's commonly used. They use Carl Walenda. Anybody remember Carl Walenda? Got a few that do. I think it was back in the 70s, maybe, a long time ago, but he walked Tallulah Gorge on tightrope. Well, the story that I heard to illustrate this point went something like this. Carl walks over to the crowd and he says, how many of you believe I can walk this tightrope? Yay, Carl, we believe you can do it. How many of you believe that I can push a wheelbarrow across this tightrope in the gorge? Yay, Carl, we believe you can do it. How many of you believe that I can push a man in the wheelbarrow across this tightrope and across the gorge? Yay, Carl, we know you can do it. Who wants to volunteer? It's the point where you volunteer is where you really believe anything. I don't care what it is, whether it's your salvation, whether it's the fact that you can judge the law. Until you take it and do something with it, you don't really believe it. Belief takes action. We're taught that in the book of James. You have got to move forward with what you know if you really believe it. And along with that concept comes, like she was speaking, the doctrine of the lesser magistrate. Now what that doctrine teaches, and it's all through the scripture, is that God's law preempts man's law. And anytime man's law says something or forces us into a situation that is against God's law, it's not only the duty, it's the obligation of those of us that are in elective office, as well as those of us that put them there, to stand against man's law when it violates God's law. So again, if you're not doing that, then you may not really believe that you should be standing for God's law. And I am seeing a lot of people in positions of power, both judges, legislators, governors, that show me by their actions that they think man's law is higher than God's law. We just watched our Supreme Court when they ruled against what God said marriage was. Now, has our governor or our state legislature stood up and said, no, God's law supersedes man's law? They have not.
And I want to add something to that. We have a state law that reaffirms marriage, traditional marriage, and the Supreme Court does not write law. They made a decision in that case only. So there was nothing wrong for our Attorney General to say, okay, that's interesting, that's how you're ruling. But in Georgia, we will uphold traditional marriage because it's the law of this state. And the law of the state is supreme. And the Supreme Court doesn't have the power over the state. You want to add anything to that?
I just like for people to remember Andrew Jackson when the Supreme Court ruled that he had to do something. I forget now exactly what the circumstance is. Somebody here may recall what it was they had ruled on. Right now it's escaping me. But he said, okay, y'all made that ruling, let's see you enforce it. I'm not going to.
Right.
That's nullification.
Excuse me, if I may, I've been a registered nurse for 20 years, and our Senate Agricultural Committee just overrode Vermont's GMO labeling law. I've been studying the effects of GMOs on our health in the nation, and Monsanto, and that was very disturbing for me. I emailed and called all the members of the Senate Agricultural Committee, and they could have voted it down, and they actually passed it on. So that was quite disturbing, and for me personally as a nurse and mother.
Yeah, and we see this all the time, and we will continue to see this happen until you are pushing on those people so hard that they say, oh, is that the way it's got to be? And the way you push on is when good men like this gentleman steps up to run against someone that we put up there that we see is not doing what he said. You got to get behind him. That's how you teach lessons to the other legislators. And until we start doing that, then we are going to continue down this same road. So again, the ball is in your court right now. You've got a man that has stepped up in this district down here now. What are you going to do? Are you going to go home and take the little card he handed and toss it in the garbage like most people do? Or are you going to make a decision to go home and say, I have got to stand for principles? Congressman Loudermilk did not do what he said he was going to do. I want a man that will do that, and you put this gentleman in office. If he doesn't do it, then you do the same thing again. That, folks, is term limits, and that is term limits that work. This hypochondriac kind of term limits that people keep talking about where you can only go up there and serve 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, I don't care what time period you choose. That's not term limits, and all that does is transfer power from the people to Congress. Because once you instill term limits on a congressman, it's just like the second term of a president who cares nothing about what the people do. Go and look at every single president that has been up there since term limits were introduced, and look and see what their second term looks like. It's terrible, every single one of them, including Reagan.
Yes.
So the main thing I want to drive home is this concept about judging the law, understanding God's law. We've got to get this in our hearts to the point that we are willing and ready to act on these things. Because until you're willing to stand up and act and actually do something about it, this country is going to continue down the same thing. Talking about it is not acting. I hate to break it to you, but it's not acting. So with that, I'll turn it over to somebody else unless y'all have some questions you would would like to ask me.
About how much time do we have?
You had 1 minute.
1 minute, do we have a question? Okay, if we don't, we'll move on. And Judge